The champagne table, where is it? And tell them the canapes need to be replaced. They're getting warm. Camille turned. The woman in front of her was draped in white, diamonds at her throat, the kind of stillness that came from never having been made to wait for anything. I don't work here. Camille didn't apologize when she said it. She turned back to her conversation. Excuse me. The voice sharpened. I'm talking to you. Camille turned again. Slower. And I answered you. I'm not with the catering staff. The woman looked her over. Slowly. Deliberately. Starting at her shoes and ending at her face, the kind of look designed to remind someone of their place. Right. A small smile that didn't reach anything. My mistake. She said it the way people said things they didn't mean at all. Camille held her gaze for one beat. Then she turned away. The woman's hand closed around her arm. I'm talking to you and you're walking away? Camille's eyes dropped to the hand on her arm, not startled. Measuring. Then her voice dropped to something quieter and more final than anger. Let go of my arm. Excuse me. I said let go of my arm. Do you know who I am? The woman stepped closer. I don't think you understand what you're doing right now. I understand perfectly. You made a mistake, I corrected it, and now you need to let go of my arm. How dare you? The smile was gone now. How dare you speak to me like that? Do you have any idea who my husband is? Do you know whose event this is? I know whose initiative this event is funding. A beat. Mine. Then, quieter. Now let go of my arm. Yuna let out a soft laugh. Not surprised, dismissive. Of course it is. Her grip tightened slightly. I'm sure everything about you is exactly what you claim. Camille didn't pull away. She held her gaze. Then let go of my arm and find someone who needs your permission to exist. Then, Yuna slapped her. The sound cut through the nearest conversations like something breaking. Heads turned. The room didn't stop, but it slowed, the way rooms do when something has happened that can't be taken back. Camille stood completely still. 1 second. The stillness of someone making a decision, not processing a shock. Then she slapped her back. Clean. Measured. Final. You think it's everyone you can just treat or talk to anyhow. Camille didn't move after. Didn't adjust her posture. Like the moment had already ended for her. The woman's mouth opened. Her hand went to her cheek. Around them, the nearest guests had stopped pretending not to watch. Security. Her voice came back sharp and high. Security. Did you see what she just? Someone get security. Now. Across the room, a man set his glass down slowly. He didn't move yet. He just watched, with the particular stillness of someone who had already decided what was going to happen next. If this is your kind of story, go ahead and like and subscribe, and stay with me because this shifts in a way she doesn't see coming. Camille Reed had not always been the kind of woman who walked into rooms like this one and felt nothing. There had been a version of her, years ago, who would have dressed differently for a night like tonight. Who would have arrived early and positioned herself near people she recognized and laughed a little too readily at things that weren't that funny. That version had been trying to prove something. She had spent a long time figuring out what she was trying to prove, and when she finally understood the answer, she stopped. Camille ran a private practice in the city 6 years now, built from a single rented consultation room and a patient list she had assembled one referral at a time. But the work she was most known for, to the people who paid attention to that kind of work, was the outreach initiative. 3 years of grant applications, city council meetings, logistics negotiations, and one very long funding gap that she had bridged personally before she found the donors to replace it. The mobile clinics would serve 4 communities that had been without consistent medical access for over a decade. Tonight's gala was meant to close the final funding gap. She had earned her place in this room. She had not been invited as decoration. Getting ready that evening, her colleague Denise had stood in the doorway of her office, watching her fix her earring. You know what these things are, Denise said. Rich people performing generosity. Doesn't it bother you? Sitting across from people who spend more on a table setting than most of your patients make in a month, and they want a plaque for it. Camille looked at herself in the small mirror she kept on her desk. As long as the money clears, they can perform all they want. You're very pragmatic for someone who cares as much as you do. I care about outcomes, Camille said. Not the process. She picked up her clutch. The clinics get built or they don't. Everything else is noise. She had treated a patient 3 months ago who had come in through a referral with almost no accompanying paperwork. The intake form had a first name and an initial where the last name should have been. No insurance information, which meant private pay. No listed emergency contact. The referral note from the intermediary was brief to the point of being unusual, a single paragraph, clinical, impersonal. The man himself had been quiet in the way that some patients were quiet, not nervous, not evasive, just economical. He answered her questions precisely and offered nothing beyond what was asked. Well-dressed in the way that people were well-dressed when money was so settled it no longer needed to announce itself. No watch, no rings, nothing that performed wealth. Just the clothes themselves, and the way he sat in the chair like he was accustomed to rooms waiting for him to speak first. She had treated him the way she treated everyone. Thoroughly. Without theater or adjustment. She had told him what he needed to know and what he needed to do, and he had listened without interrupting. Before he left, he had said, "Thank you, Dr. Reed." She had said, "Take care of yourself." She had not thought about him again. She arrived at the gala at 8 and moved through it the way she moved through most rooms, not announcing herself, not shrinking, just present. She knew a few people. She spoke to them. She kept her champagne glass mostly full and mostly untouched and found a natural position near the drinks table where she could have a real conversation without having to perform for the room. She was mid-conversation with a researcher she had been trying to connect with for months when the woman in white approached her. Shin Woo-jin had been in the room for 43 minutes and had already identified 3 things that were going to require his attention before the end of the week. He had come because Choi Byung-ho had asked him to. Not directly, Byung-ho never asked for things directly when he could route the request through enough intermediaries to make it feel like an invitation rather than a need. Woo-jin had come anyway, because Byung-ho owed him a significant sum of money and the patients required to wait for it had a cost, and attending a gala was a cheaper form of that cost than the alternatives. He had been managing Byung-ho's situation quietly for 8 months. The man's portfolio had deteriorated faster than his reputation had caught up to the fact, which meant he was still being treated in rooms like this one as though he were the person he had been 3 years ago. Woo-jin found this neither interesting nor particularly relevant. What was relevant was the timeline, and the timeline was becoming inconvenient. He got a drink at the bar and turned to survey the room in the way he always surveyed rooms, not sweeping, not obvious, just a steady and unhurried assessment that catalogued what mattered and discarded what didn't. He saw her before she could have seen him. It took him a moment to place her. She was in a different context, a different room, different clothes, but the recognition came cleanly once it arrived. The directness, the economy of her attention. The way she was talking to the person across from her like that conversation was the only thing happening, which was unusual in a room where most people were having one conversation while monitoring 3 others. Camille had treated him 3 months ago like he was a person with a medical problem, not a name with implications. She had not adjusted her manner when she understood, or perhaps didn't understand, who he was. She had not asked questions that went beyond what the appointment required. In his world, that was not ordinary. He did not approach her. He watched her from across the room and noted that she moved through the space with the particular ease of someone who had nothing to prove to it. Then he watched Choi Yoona notice her. Choi Yoona had married into the name and then spent 12 years behaving as though it had always belonged to her, which was the only way to survive a thing like that. She was not unintelligent. She was not even, in the strictest sense, unkind. She donated to causes. She remembered assistants' birthdays. She could be warm when warmth was useful. What she was, in the deepest and most habitual part of herself, was certain. Certain of hierarchies, of categories, of who belonged where and what their presence in a room signified. She saw Camille near the drinks table and her brain did what it always did, sorted, filed, concluded. She crossed the room and was 4 words into her request before anything complicated happened. Security came from the left side of the room. 2 men, moving with the particular efficiency of people who had been called to manage a situation and had already decided how it would go. They didn't look at Camille like someone they recognized. They looked at her like a problem they'd already decided how to remove. They were 3 steps from Camille when Woojin moved. He didn't hurry. He crossed the room at the same pace. He did everything, unhurried, deliberate, as though the outcome had already been arranged and the movement was a formality. He stepped into their path at the exact point they would have reached her. Not loudly. 4 or 5 words, spoken at a register that was carried to them and no one else. The 2 men slowed, stopped, looked at each other with the expression of people rapidly reassessing a situation. One of them nodded before the other had fully processed it. Then they found somewhere else to be. Yuna turned to Woojin. Her expression recalibrated. They knew each other from a dozen shared events, shared circles, shared tables. They were, in the taxonomy she used to organize the world, the same kind of people. She expected alignment. She expected, at minimum, acknowledgement. Woojin looked at her the way you looked at something you had already finished considering. She turned to her husband. Byung-hoo was already moving across the room, reading the situation quickly because reading situations quickly was the skill that had kept him functional longer than his finances should have allowed. He reached Woojin and spoke in a low voice, precise and efficient, with the slight forward lean of a man who needed something and was trying not to look like it. "It's handled," Byung-hoo said. "It was a misunderstanding. She overreacted. We'll make sure nothing." "Byung-hoo." Woojin's voice was even. Byung-hoo stopped. "We'll talk on Thursday." A beat. "Don't be late." Byung-hoo straightened slightly. Nodded. He walked back to his wife with his shoulders carrying the relief of a man who had interpreted a neutral sentence as a favorable one. He had interpreted it incorrectly. Camille watched all of it from where she stood. She had not moved since the slap. She was watching the man she did not yet know the name of, watching the way the room had shifted around him without him asking it to, watching the particular quality of stillness he carried that was not passivity, but its opposite. A man completely at ease with the fact that nothing in this room would go in a direction he did not permit. She did not know who he was, but she understood what she had seen. She had seen authority before. This wasn't that. This was something quieter and harder to refuse. The gala continued. The band returned. Conversations resumed with the slightly heightened energy of people who had witnessed something and were not processing it through the socially acceptable method of pretending to talk about other things. Yuna moved back through the room. She was too experienced to fall apart in a space like this. She straightened. She smiled. She found 2 people she knew well enough to anchor to, and she performed normalcy with the discipline of someone who had been doing it for a long time. But she had seen her husband's face when he came back from speaking to Woojin. She had read it with the accuracy of 12 years of marriage to a man who could not hide financial anxiety the way he could hide everything else. She knew that expression. She had not seen it in over a year, and she had hoped she would not see it again. She did not yet understand what had caused it. That understanding would come later. In a car on the way home, when Byung-hoo finally said the words that had been sitting behind his eyes all evening. When she understood that the woman she had dismissed and humiliated in the middle of a room full of people who mattered was not a stranger to Shin Woojin. That Shin Woojin had been watching. That when Shin Woojin recalibrated a decision, there was no process for appealing it. But that was later. For now, Woojin moved to the center of the ballroom, where a cluster of men were talking about the kind of things men at galas talked about when they were trying to determine each other's weight in a room. He joined the edge of the conversation. Said very little. Listened with the attention of someone who found information useful regardless of its source. Then, in the natural gap between one topic and the next, he mentioned that he had been reassessing some of his current investment commitments. That efficiency mattered to him above most things. That he had perhaps extended patience in certain situations longer than the situation merited, and that he had been thinking about correcting that. He named nothing. He named no one. In rooms like this, nothing needed to be named directly. Money moved in this kind of space through implication and inference, through the slight lowering of a voice and the particular phrasing of a sentence that everyone present understood how to read. The men around him received what he had said the way they received everything, through the specific frequency of people who spent their lives tracking where money was going and what its movement meant. Two of them found reasons to move to other conversations within the next 4 minutes. Young-hoo felt it from across the room before he understood it. Something changed in the temperature of the space around him, subtle, unannounced, the specific sensation of a room quietly deciding something. His face changed. He could not stop it from changing. Yuna saw his face from 12 feet away and understood that something had gone wrong before she knew what it was. The nearest conversations became shorter. Eye contact became brief, redirected, apologetic in the way that withdrawal was always apologetic when it needed to happen publicly. A woman who had greeted Yuna warmly 10 minutes earlier didn't look at her as she moved away. No confrontation. No declaration. Just the room, quietly, closing a door. Then the MC stepped to the podium. The final fundraising total for the Medical Outreach Initiative was announced. Led by Dr. Camille Reed, the MC said, gesturing toward her. This time, the name didn't pass unnoticed. A few people turned, not openly, but enough. The room responded warmly. This was the kind of cause that made people feel well about themselves, and feeling well about themselves was a significant portion of why they attended evenings like this. The MC ran through the donations. And then the final contribution, logged late in the evening, listed as anonymous. The number was read aloud. It was larger than every other contribution combined. The room reacted with the noise that rooms made when a number exceeded expectation. Someone near Camille grabbed her arm and said something she didn't register. She was already scanning. Camille found Woo Jin across the room. He was already looking at her, not checking if she noticed, just certain that she would. No gesture, no acknowledgement, nothing that could be pointed to. But she knew. She was between patients 2 days later, reviewing a file at her desk, when her receptionist appeared in the doorway with the expression she used when something had happened that she didn't have a category for. Woo Jin walked in behind her. No entourage. No preparation. He looked the same as he had at the gala, dark, controlled, taking up exactly the amount of space he had decided to take up and no more. The receptionist looked between them and left quickly, pulling the door behind her. Camille set the file down. He stood on the other side of her desk and didn't perform a preamble. What happened at that gala shouldn't have happened in a room I was present in. Camille looked at him steadily. Is that what you came to say? Part of it. What's the other part? I'm sorry it happened to you. She studied him. Then, hold on, you were my patient. 3 months ago. Yes. She ran it back, the intake form, the initial where a last name should have been, the man who had sat in her consultation chair and answered her questions without offering anything additional and thanked her once before he left. And then the gala. Security stopping mid-movement. A room adjusting its temperature around a single person without being asked to. Shin, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. She had heard the name before. Not loudly, names like his didn't travel loudly. But she had heard it, in the specific way that certain names circulated in the city through implication and inference, never quite attaching to anything verifiable. She didn't step back. She didn't react. She simply took the information and placed it next to everything else she knew, and looked at him with the assessment of someone deciding what to do with a new variable. He waited. He seemed comfortable waiting. Why didn't you say anything? She asked. At the gala. At the moment. Because you didn't need me to. A beat. And I don't interfere unless I have to. She held his gaze. Then, almost to herself, no. I didn't. Something in the room settled. Not warmly, not yet. But honestly. Dinner, he said. If you'd like. She looked at him for a long moment. I'll think about it. He nodded once. He picked up a card from the edge of her desk. She hadn't even seen him put it there, and replaced it with one of his own. When you've thought about it, he said. He left. She looked at the card on her desk for a long time before she picked it up. She called him that evening. Thursday, she said. 7. I'll send a car. I have a car. A pause. 7, he said. The restaurant was not what she had expected. No reservation list designed to perform exclusivity, no lighting calculated to impress. Just a quiet room with good food and enough space between tables for a real conversation. Woo Jin was already there when she arrived. Standing, not sitting, she noted that. He waited until she was seated before he sat. Camille looked at the menu. You picked somewhere modest. I picked somewhere good. Is there a difference? Usually. She looked up. He was watching her with the same quality of attention she had noticed at the gala, not intrusive, but complete. Like he had decided to be in this conversation and meant it entirely. Do people ever tell you no? She asked. He held her gaze. Not twice. Is that a warning? It's an observation. She looked at him for a moment. Then she laughed, short, genuine, unguarded in a way she hadn't planned. Okay. He didn't smile. But something in his expression shifted, slightly, in a way she was already learning to read. He showed up to things after that. Not loudly, not with an announcement. He attended a planning session for her outreach initiative and sat at the back of the room and said nothing and was gone before most people registered he had been there. A week later, a logistics problem that had been stalling her mobile clinic rollout for 2 months was resolved. No one connected it to him. She did. She started lowering her guard without deciding to. That was the thing about him, he didn't ask for it. He didn't create conditions designed to produce it. He just showed up, consistently, and let her arrive at her own conclusions. Then a colleague mentioned his name in passing. Not to her directly, just in a conversation she was adjacent to, a conversation about a development deal on the east side of the city and the particular silence that had surrounded it when certain people pulled out. His name came up in the way it apparently came up in those kinds of conversations, at the edges, implied rather than stated, connected to outcomes rather than actions. She went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the conversation around her. It wasn't fear. It was a calculation. That night she canceled their plan. Sent him a message that something had come up. He replied, understood. One word. No pressure. She sat with it for 2 days. She thought about what she had built. The practice, the initiative, the name she had made for herself in this city through nothing except the quality of her work and the stubbornness of her belief that the work was worth doing. She thought about what complicated meant and what it cost and whether she was the kind of person who could afford to find out. She thought about the way he had stepped into the path of those security guards, not urgently, not dramatically, just precisely. Like disorder was a thing he moved through as a matter of course. Like protection was not a gesture but a habit. On the 3rd day, she called him. I need to say something. Say it. I built everything I have with clean hands. My practice. My initiative. My name. I didn't come from anything and I worked for all of it, and I am not going to watch it become complicated. Silence on the line. He let her finish. I like you. I'm not pretending I don't. But I need to know what I'm stepping into. Not a version of it. The actual thing. When he spoke, his voice was the same as always, even unhurried. But underneath the evenness there was something she had not heard in it before. My world is what it is, he said. I'm not going to dress it up for you because you deserve a straight answer more than you deserve a comfortable one. A beat. It costs things. It demands things. There are parts of it that don't resolve cleanly and won't. She waited. But you are not in that world. Nothing in that world will reach you. I will make sure of that, not as a promise I'm making to persuade you, but as a fact about what I'm willing to do. You can't guarantee that. I can tell you what I'm willing to spend to make it true. And I think by now you understand that when I decide something. He stopped. Then, quieter, in a register she had not heard from him before, I have kept everyone at a distance my entire life. It's simpler. It's cleaner. I am not doing that with you, not this time. The line was quiet. Camille sat with it. With all of it, the weight of it, the clarity of it, the particular quality of a man who told you the truth about himself and then let you decide what to do with it. I'm not choosing your world, she said finally. I'm choosing you. A beat. Don't make me regret separating the two. She called him 2 evenings later. I'm in. He didn't mark it. Didn't make it a moment. Just, I know. Weeks later, Choi Yuna attended a luncheon on the other side of the city. Smaller venue. Fewer names. Her husband stood beside her with the posture of a man who had forgotten how to take up space in a room that no longer made space for him. The conversations were polite. Brief. No one recalibrated when they walked in. No one needed to. Camille was laughing at something unguarded, unmanaged, The laugh of someone who had forgotten to track how she was coming across. Wu Jin watched her. Not the way he watched rooms. Not with the steady assessment he brought to spaces and people and situations that needed to be understood and accounted for. Just watching her. Like she was the only fixed point in the room and everything else was movement. And for the first time in a long time, he let it stay that way. If you made it to the end, you already understand. Some mistakes don't explode. They quietly change everything. Or do they really stay quiet? And tell me, would you have handled it differently? If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. See you in the next video.